On the 18th of June 2023, the world watched as 5 people disappeared into the North Atlantic while travelling to the wreck of the Titanic. 4 days later, the search ended with the devastating conclusion Titan hadn't become trapped beneath the sea, it had imploded. What if the story didn't begin on that Sunday morning? What if the decisions that led to the disaster had started years earlier? This isn't just a story of a submarine, it's a story of ambition, innovation, confidence, and the choices that changed everything. I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. Stockton Rush wasn't born into the world of deep-sea exploration. He was born in California in 1962 into a wealthy family with a history of success. His family name carried influence, and from a young age he was fascinated by engineering, machines, and aviation. As a teenager, he earned his pilot's license, becoming one of the youngest certified jet transport pilots in the United States. Flying just wasn't a hobby, it was part of who he was. He later studied aerospace engineering before earning an MBA, combining technical knowledge with business and a bit ambition. Forgive me. But despite his background in aviation, his attention gradually shifted to another frontier, the ocean. More than 70% of our planet is covered in water, yet we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the deepest parts of our ocean. To Stockton Rush, this wasn't acceptable. In 2009, Rush co-founded OceanGate. His mission wasn't simply to build submarines, he wanted to make deep ocean exploration accessible. For decades, diving to extreme depths had been reserved for governments, navies, and scientific organisations. Rush believed private companies could change that. He often compared deep-sea exploration to the early days of aviation. People once believed commercial flight was too dangerous. Innovation changed that. Rush believed the same thing could happen beneath the ocean. One devastation captured the world's imagination more than any other. The RMS Titanic. Resting nearly 3,800 metres beneath the Atlantic Ocean, the wreckage became one of the most famous places on Earth that very few people get to see. OceanGate wanted to change that. Instead of government scientists, private citizens, explorers, business leaders, researchers, anyone willing and able to pay around $250,000 for the experience, to Rush, this wasn't tourism, it was exploration. From the beginning, Stockton Rush believed the industry had just become too cautious. He argued that regulation slowed innovation, he believed technologies had moved on, and he wanted to prove that a new generation of submersibles could be lighter, cheaper, and more efficient than traditional designs. That thinking would eventually lead to one of the most controversial engineering decisions in modern exploration. A pressure hull made from carbon fibre. Supporters saw innovation, critics saw unnecessary risk. Now here's where our investigation begins. Was Stockton Rush an ambitious engineer trying to change the world, or was he so convinced that he was right that he could stop listening to those who disagreed? That's a question we'll return throughout this series, because the evidence suggests Titan's story wasn't shaped by one decision. It was shaped by hundreds, and of many of them began long before the final dive. Next time, we'll investigate the moment Stockton Rush publicly admitted he broke the rules. What rules he was talking about. Were there legal rules, engineering standards, or simply traditions he believed he was holding innovation back? We'll separate fact from opinion and ask whether the rules exist for a reason. Until then, the evidence is on the table, the questions remain. We'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. See you soon. At some point, safety is just pure waste. These are perhaps the most infamous words ever spoken by Stockton Rush. After the Titan disaster, that quote spread around the world. For many, it became proof that OceanGate CEO didn't care about safety. But is that what he really meant? Was Stockton Rush deliberately ignoring safety, or was he trying to challenge an industry he believed had become too cautious? Today we are looking at the man behind those words, what rules he claimed he had broken, and whether those rules existed for a reason. I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. Now before we can understand Stockton Rush, we need to understand the world he was trying to change. Deep sea exploration isn't like flying an aeroplane or driving a car. Every journey to the ocean floor is dangerous. At Titanic's resting place, nearly 3,800 metres below the surface, the pressure is around 380 times greater than what we experience at sea level. Every square inch of a submersible is being squeezed by thousands of pounds of force. Because of that, industry developed slowly. New designs were tested, retested, re-reviewed, independently certified. It wasn't because engineering lacked in imagination, it was because mistakes at those depths are almost always fatal. Rush didn't see it that way. He believed innovation had stalled. In interviews, he argued that the process of being held back by regulations and decades of doing the things the same way. He often compared deep-sea exploration to the early days of aviation. If aircraft designers had followed every existing rule, he argued, aviation would never have advanced. He wanted OceanGate to become the company that changed the industry. And that meant using new materials, new ideas, and in his own words, breaking some rules. One interview would later come back to haunt him. Rush said he had broken rules to build Titan. But what rules was he talking about? And this is important. There is no evidence that he admitted breaking the law. Instead, he appeared to be referring to a traditional engineering practice and industry standards. He believed some long-established methods were unnecessarily restrictive. To him, challenging those standards wasn't reckless, it was innovation. His critics saw it very differently. Perhaps no quote has ever been repeated more than this one. At some point, safety is just pure waste. On its own, it sounds shocking, but context matters. Rush wasn't saying safety didn't matter. He was arguing that adding endless layers of protection beyond what was necessary could stop innovation. The question is, where is that point? How much safety is enough? And who gets to decide? Those questions remain at the heart of the Titan story. Experienced submersible engineers weren't convinced. Many believed OceanGate was moving too quickly. Some questioned the use of carbon fibre. Others were concerned that Titan wasn't independently classified by an establishment marine certified body. To them, certification was unnecessary paperwork. It was another set of experienced eye checking that every crucial system had been independently assessed. Rush disagreed. He believed the existing system wasn't designed for innovation. One of the hardest parts of this investigation is separating confidence from overconfidence. History is full of innovators who ignored controversial wisdom and changed the world. History is also full of people who believed they were right despite repeated warnings. Which category Stockton Rush belonged to is something we'll continue to explore, because as this series progresses, we'll discover what concerns about Titan weren't raised after the disaster. Many were raised years before it. Next time, we'll investigate the engineering decision that divided experts from the very beginning. Why building the world's deepest tourist submersible from carbon fibre? Was it a breakthrough, or was it an experiment that should never have carried passengers? We'll examine the science, the testing, and the warnings. Until then, the evidence is on the table, the questions remain, and we'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. See you next time. Imagine you're designing a submersible that will dive almost 4 kilometres beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Every inch of the vessel will be squeezed by thousands of pounds of pressure. Every dive will push the materials to their absolute limits. So what would you build it from? Steel? Titanium? Those have been trusted choices for decades. OceanGate chose something else. Carbon fibre. Today we're asking why. Was it a breakthrough that could have changed deep-sea exploration forever, or was it a gamble from the very beginning? I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. To understand Titan, we first need to understand the problem. The wreckage of the Titanic lies around 3,800 metres below the surface. At that depth, pressure is immense. Every dive subjects the pressure hull to forces most of us can barely imagine. Unlike an aeroplane, which keeps pressure out, a deep-sea submersible has to keep pressure from crushing everything inside. That means every material matters, every joint, every bolt, every layer. But why carbon fibre? For decades, deep-sea submersibles were built from steel or titanium. They're heavy, expensive, but engineers understood how they behaved after repeat dives. Carbon fibre offered something different. It was lighter, stronger for its weight, it didn't rust, and it could reduce costs, and Stockton Rush believed it represented the future of deep-sea engineering. To him, it wasn't taking a shortcut, it was embracing new technology. But there was one major concern. carbon fibre behaves differently from metal. When an aircraft flies, carbon fibre experiences forces that engineers understand extremely well. Titan faced something different. Repeated crushing pressure, every dive squeezing the hull, every ascent releasing that pressure, over time, tiny flaws inside the material can grow. Layers can begin to separate. This is known as delamination. And unlike metal, the damage isn't always visible from the outside. This is where OceanGate began to face some serious questions. Several experienced engineers argued that carbon fibre wasn't suitable for repeat dives carrying passengers. They weren't saying carbon fibre was a bad material, far from it. Carbon fibre is used in aircrafts, race cars, spacecraft. The concern was whether it was right material for a pressured hull repeatedly travelling to Titanic's depths. OceanGate believed it was. Many experts remain unconvinced. Stockton Rush maintained that Titan was being monitored. The company used an acoustic monitoring system designed to listen to changes within the hull during dives. Rush believed the system would provide warnings if the damage was developing. Supporters saw innovation. Critics questioned whether the detection damage during the dive was enough that if the structure had already begun to weaken, and that debate continues today. The investigation isn't about saying carbon fibre is good or bad. It's about asking whether it has proven safe for the specific job. Has it been tested enough? Did the engineers fully understand how it would behave after repeat dives? Or was OceanGate learning as it went? These are the questions investigators have spent years trying to answer. Now next time we'll examine those tests. How much testing did Titan's hull actually undergo? Why was one hull replaced? What did OceanGate learn from earlier designs? And could those answers have revealed what was coming? Until then, the evidence is on the table. Questions remain, and we'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. See you next time. Before anyone paid hundreds of thousands of pounds to descend to the wreckage of Titanic, before OceanGate announced successful expeditions, before the world had even heard the name Titan, there was one question that had to be answered. Was the submersible safe? Every aircraft, every commercial ship, every passenger vehicle undergoes extensive testing before carrying people. So what about Titan? Was it tested enough? And more importantly, who decided when that was enough? I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. Designing a submersible isn't simply about building something strong. It's about proving beyond reasonable doubt that it can survive repeated journeys into one of the most harshest environments on Earth. Manufacturers usually carry out computer modelling, pressure chamber testing, inspections, and repeated trial dives. Many operators also choose to have their vessels independently certified by a specialist marine organisation. That process doesn't guarantee a vehicle can never fail. It proves another layer of scrutiny before people climb aboard. OceanGate took a different route. Rather than seeking independent classification for Titan, the company chose to rely on its own testing program and engineering analysis. Stockton Rush argued that traditional certification slowed down innovation, and that existing standards weren't designed for new technologies like carbon fibre pressured hulls. He believed OceanGate could demonstrate safely through real-world testing and continuous monitoring. Supporters viewed this as a modern approach. Critics believed independent certification exists for exactly this reason. One of the lesser-known facts about Titan is that the submersible didn't keep the same pressure hull throughout its life. An earlier carbon fibre hull was retired after testing raised concerns of how it would perform over repeated pressure cycles. OceanGate later built a replacement hull, stating that lessons from the first have been incorporated into the new design. The decision raised important questions. If engineers were still learning how the material behaved over time, how much confidence could you have had in predicting its long-term lifespan? OceanGate introduced something it believed set Titan apart, an acoustic monitoring system. The idea was straightforward. As carbon fibre experiences stresses, tiny fractures can produce sounds. Sensors inside Titan were designed to detect those signs during dives, providing warnings if the hull began to fail. Rush believed this technology offered an additional level of safety. Some experts questioned whether detecting damage during the dive left enough time to respond if the structure was already close to failure. To this day, opinions differ on how effective such a system could be in a rapid developing emergency. What is clear is that OceanGate carried out testing. The question has never been whether testing happened. The real question is whether the amount, type and independence of the testing was enough for a passenger submersible travelling nearly 4 kilometres beneath the Atlantic Ocean. That debate continues to shape investigations into the disaster. Next time, we'll hear from the people who weren't convinced: engineers, former employees, industry experts, some warning that Titan's design raised serious concerns years before the fatal dive. Who are they? What exactly did they say? And why weren't those warnings enough to stop the project? Until then, the evidence is on the table, the questions remain, we'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. See you soon. Every disaster has a moment when someone asks the difficult question. Sometimes they're ignored, sometimes they're told not to worry, and sometimes they leave. Years before Titan's final dive, one OceanGate employee raised serious concerns about the submersible's design. His name was David Lockridge, and was he an alarmist, or was he trying to prevent a tragedy? I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. David wasn't an outsider commenting from afar. He was an OceanGate Director of Marine Operations. His responsibilities included overseeing the safety operation of the company's submersibles and inspecting equipment before missions. He wasn't simply offering an opinion, he was employed to identify potential safety issues, and during his inspection of Titan, he believed he had found some. According to the court documents made public after he departed from the company, Lockridge questioned whether Titan had undergone significant testing. He was particularly concerned about the carbon fibre pressure hull and wanted more evidence that it could safely withstand repeat dives to Titanic's depths. He reportedly recommended additional non-destructive testing capable of detecting flaws beneath the surface of the material. His concern wasn't that Titan would definitely fail, it was that nobody could confidently prove it wouldn't. OceanGate disagreed. The company maintained confidence in its engineering process and believed its testing and monitoring systems were applicable. As the disagreement grew, the relationship between Lockridge and OceanGate deteriorated, and in 2018 he was dismissed from the company. OceanGate later filed legal action retaliating to the confidential information, while Lockridge filed his own legal claim connected to his dismissal. The dispute was eventually settled, but many of the concerns raised in the legal filings became public. After the loss of Titan in 2023, these documents received renewed attention. People began asking whether Lockridge's concerns should have carried more weight. Would additional testing have changed anything? Could independent certification have identified the problems? Or were his concerns only one part of a much larger story? These are difficult questions, and the answers are still debated. It's important to remember that raising concerns doesn't automatically mean a disaster is inevitable. Engineers challenge designs every day. Most disagreements never lead to catastrophic problems. And what makes this case different is what happened years later. A submersible carrying 5 people was lost during a dive to the Titanic. That tragic outcome had inevitably led investigators to revisit every warning that came before. Next time we'll examine another extraordinary chapter in this story. OceanGate wasn't only questioned by former employees. Leaders from across the deep-sea exploration industry also expressed concerns about Titan's design and the decision to operate without independent classification. What did they say, and how did OceanGate respond? Until then, the evidence is on the table, the questions remain, and we'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. Now imagine building a revolutionary new aircraft. Before it even carries passengers, experienced pilots, engineers and manufacturers told you they're worried about its design. Would you stop and listen? Or would you believe they simply didn't understand your vision? Years before Titan's final dive, some of the biggest names in deep-sea exploration industry questioned OceanGate's approach. They weren't internet critics, these were people who'd spent decades designing, building and operating submersibles capable of reaching the deepest parts of the ocean. So what were they worried about? And why weren't their concerns enough to change the course of history? I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. In 2018, OceanGate received a letter from the Marine Technology Society, a respected organisation whose members included engineers, scientists, professionals who worked in the marine technology business. This letter wasn't an attack on OceanGate. Instead, it expressed concern that Titan, being developed under independent classification by an established marine certification, is what they required, or what they felt needed to be done. The authors warned that OceanGate marketing could give passengers the impression that Titan had undergone a level of independent verification, and in their view it had not. Their message was simple. Innovation is important, but independent assessments exist to provide both passengers and the future of the industry protection. Stockton Rush saw things differently. He believed that certification processes were too slow and too focused on traditional designs. He argued that existing standards weren't built for new ideas such as carbon fibre pressure hulls. He maintained that OceanGate's own testing engineers and real-world experience provided confidence in Titan's design. In interviews, he suggested that waiting years for certification could prevent meaningful innovation from ever reaching the market. To Rush, progress required taking calculated risks. The disagreement exposed a much bigger divide. One side believed independent certification was essential because no single company should be responsible for judging the safety of its own experimental passenger vehicle. Others believed innovation often moves faster than regulations, and that companies develop new technologies sometimes have to create their own path. Neither side argued against exploration. Both wanted to see deep-sea research continue. The disagreement was how much evidence should be required before carrying paying passengers to almost 4 kilometres beneath the Atlantic Ocean. After Titan was lost in June 2023, the 2018 letter attracted worldwide attention. Many people asked whether it should have been taken more seriously. Would independent certification have identified fatal weaknesses? Would it have required more testing, or would Titan have still been able to be approved? These questions remain unanswered, and what we know is that the concerns raised in the 2018 document became a significant part of the investigations, and that was what they followed. One of the biggest lessons from engineering history is that process and safety are not enemies. The greatest innovations often succeed because they survive the toughest scrutiny. Titan's story reminds us that challenging, accepted ideas can lead to remarkable breakthroughs. But when human lives are involved, every challenge must also survive equal remarkable evidence. Next time we'll follow the money. Who invested in OceanGate? How was Titan funded? And did investors understand the risks? And what happened to the company after the disaster? Until then, the evidence is on the table. The questions remain. We'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. Every ambitious idea needs one thing to become reality: money. Without funding, Titan would never have left the drawing board. OceanGate needed investors, paying customers, and a steady flow of income to continue developing its technology and operating its incredibly ambitious expeditions. But where did the money come from? Did investors fully understand the risk? And after the tragedy in June 2023, what became of the company they had backed? I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. Deep-sea exploration has never been cheap. Designing a submersible capable of reaching the Titanic requires specialist engineering, custom-built components, research vessels, high-trained crew, and years of development. Every expedition costs hundreds of thousands of pounds to organise. Unlike government-funded research programmes, OceanGate was a private company. That meant it had to attract investors while also generating an income. The challenge wasn't simply building Titan, it was building a business around it. OceanGate raised money from private investors, who believed the company could transform deep-sea exploration. Stockton Rush spoke passionately about making ocean more accessible. His vision extended beyond visiting the Titanic. He imagined fleets of advanced submersibles supporting scientific research, underwater archaeology, offshore industries, and the future of exploration projects. To many investors, OceanGate wasn't just selling trips to the famous shipwreck. It was presenting itself as a company developing new technology with the potential to reshape an entire industry. Like any investor, however, there were risks. Developing new technology is expensive, and success is never guaranteed. OceanGate also generated income through its own expeditions. People who travelled aboard Titan weren't described simply as tourists. The company often referred to them as mission specialists. Participants paid substantial sums to join expeditions, taking part in activities that included operating equipment, collecting information, and assisting with aspects of the mission. Supporters argued this created more engaging experience than a conventional tourist trip. Critics questioned whether changing the title altered the reality that paying members of the public were travelling in an experimental submersible. That debate became even more intensive after the disaster. Even with investment, the expedition fees OceanGate faced significant costs. Research and development continued, equipment needed maintaining, support vessels had to be chartered, crews had to be paid. The company was pursuing ambitious goals in a field where process was both technologically difficult and financially demanding. Innovation can attract investment, but it also creates pressure to keep moving forward. Following the loss of Titan, OceanGate suspended its exploration activities. Soon after, the company announced that it had ceased operation. Its future ambitions ended almost overnight. Investigations into the disaster began. Investors, families, regulators, and the wider engineering community all wanted answers. The financial story has become secondary. The focus was now on understanding exactly what happened and whether it could have been prevented. Money alone doesn't explain the Titan disaster, neither does ambition. Together, they helped us understand the environment in which OceanGate operated. Developing revolutionary technology requires investment. Investment brings expectations, and expectations can influence the pace in which companies push forward. Whether that played a role in Titan's story is one of the many questions investigators have explored. Next time, we'll examine Titan's previous dives. Were there warning signs before the final expedition? Did passengers ever report problems? And were there clues that with hindsight now seem impossible to ignore? Until then, the evidence is on the table, the questions remain, and we'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. Every major disaster leaves people asking the same question. Were there warning signs? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes events unfold so quickly that nobody could have predicted them. In other cases, when investigators look back, they begin to notice small incidents that once seemed unrelated. A communications problem, a delayed mission, a piece of equipment that didn't behave as expected. On their own, they may appear insignificant. Together, they paint a very different picture. So before Titan's final dive, were there clues that something wasn't right? Or are we only connecting those dots because we already know how the story ends? I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. By the time Titan made its final descent in June 2023, it had already completed a number of expeditions to the wreck of the Titanic. Many dives were completed successfully. Passengers returned with incredible photographs and stories of seeing one of history's most famous shipwrecks with their own eyes. Those successful missions strengthened OceanGate's confidence. Each completed dive suggested the submersible could make the journey and return safely. But success doesn't always mean there are no problems. It simply means those problems didn't become catastrophic. Reports from previous expeditions described a variety of technological issues. Some dives experienced delays because of weather. Others encountered equipment problems that had to be solved before continuing. And there were occasions when communication between Titan and the support ship was interrupted. Navigation systems sometimes required adjustment. In deep-sea exploration, issues like these are not unheard of. Operating thousands of meters beneath the ocean surface is one of the most challenging environments on Earth. The important question is whether these incidents were routine or were the early indicators something was more serious. Throughout this series, we've returned to one subject again and again, the carbon fibre pressure hull. Every dive exposed the hull to extraordinary pressures before allowing it to return to normal conditions during the ascent. Supporters argued the designer completed multiple successful dives. Critics argued that repeat pressure cycles could gradually weaken the material in a way that weren't immediately visible. That disagreement remains unresolved before the final expedition. One challenge investigators always face is something called hindsight bias. Once we know the ending, it's tempting to believe the warning signs were obvious all along. But before June 2023, many people viewed Titan as an innovative submarine that had already visited Titanic several times. Others remained deeply concerned. Both perspectives exist at the same time. Only after tragedy did every earlier incident receive renewed attention. No single delay, no communication problem, no equipment issue can on its own explain what happened to Titan. Engineering disasters are rarely caused by one event. More often, they're a result of several factors coming together at the exact wrong moment. And that is why investigators examine every previous mission, every maintenance record, and every reported problem. They are not looking for one dramatic clue. They are trying to understand whether a pattern exists. For OceanGate, that's exactly what happened after the loss of Titan. Investigators began reviewing years of expedition logs, technical data, and witness accounts to determine whether there had been an opportunity to identify a developing problem before the dive. This is perhaps the hardest question in the entire investigation. Could anyone have known? If you had stood on the deck of the supporting ship before Titan's final descent, would you have been any obvious reason to stop the mission? Some people believe the earlier concerns about the hull and the certification should have been enough. Others argue that Titan had completed previous dives successfully and there was no clear evidence that a disaster was about to strike. It is a reminder that risk is often easier to recognise after the outcome is known. Next time we'll reconstruct the final mission itself. Who was on board? What happened on the morning of the 18th of June 2023? When was contact lost? And how did a routine dive become one of the most widely reported maritime disasters in recent history? We'll separate the confirmed timeline from the rumours that spread across the internet, and until then, the evidence is on the table, the questions remain, and we'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. Sunday, the 18th of June 2023. For those on board the support ship, Polar Prince, it meant to be another expedition to one of the world's most famous shipwrecks. The weather was favourable, the crew had prepared the submersible, and 5 people climbed inside Titan, sealing the hatch above them and beginning their descent towards the Titanic. None of them knew it would be their final journey. Today we're reconstructing the day using a confirmed timeline, separated established facts from rumour that spread around the world. I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. Titan carried 5 people: Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, the man who had spent years developing the submersible; Hamish Harding, a British businessman, pilot and explorer, known for taking part in record-breaking expeditions; Mr. Dawood, a Pakistani-British businessman, and his 19-year-old son, Solomon, who joined his father on the expedition; and Paul Harney, and forgive me for this, Nara Golet, often called Mr. Titanic, one of the world's most experienced Titanic researchers who had visited the wreck many times during his career. Each had different reasons for making the journey, but all shared the same goal: to see Titanic resting nearly 4 kilometres beneath the Atlantic Ocean. On the morning of the 18th of June, Titan was launched from the Polar Prince. The descent to the wreckage normally took around 2 hours. During that time, the submersible remained in contact with the support ship using text-based communication system designed for underwater use. Unlike aircraft, radio signals do not travel well through seawater. Communication beneath the ocean relies on slower acoustic systems. That meant messages could be delayed and were far more limited than conversations were used on the surface. As Titan descended, communications continued as expected. The crew exchanged routine messages with the support ship, and then around 1 hour 45 minutes into the dive, contact was lost. At first there was no immediate reason to assume the worst. Communication issues had occurred on previous expeditions. It was possible Titan had simply lost contact temporarily. The support crew raided and they attempted to re-establish communication, but Titan never responded. As more time passed, concerns began to grow. The planned communication never resumed, and Titan also failed to return to the surface when expected. The situation changed from temporary loss of contact to a potential emergency. The United States Coast Guard was then notified. An international search operation soon began. Ships, aircraft, and remotely operated vehicles from several organisations were deployed across the vast area of the Atlantic Ocean. At that point, nobody knew what had happened. There was hope that Titan might still be intact and somewhere beneath the surface. Over the next few days, the story dominated news headlines around the globe. Millions of people followed the search almost in real time. Experts appeared on television explaining the challenges of locating a small submersible in one of the deepest and most remote parts of the ocean. As information slowly emerged, social media became flooded with theories. Some suggested Titan was trapped on the seabed, others believed it had drifted to the surface. Many claims were shared as facts before investigators had any evidence to support them. Separating truth from speculation became increasingly difficult. Next time we'll examine the search itself, why finding Titan was difficult, what were rescuers racing against, and what was the significance of the underwater sounds that made headlines, and how did investigators eventually discover what happened. Until then, the evidence is on the table, the questions remain, and we'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. On the morning of the 18th of June, 2023, Titan disappeared. At first, nobody knew why. There was no distress call, no emergency beacon, no clear indication of where the submersible was. Only silence. What followed became one of the largest and most technological challenging deep-sea search operations in recent history. For 4 days, rescue teams from multiple countries raced against time, but they were searching an area larger than some cities, for a vessel smaller than a family car, nearly 4 kilometres beneath the Atlantic Ocean. I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. One number dominated every news bulletin: 96 hours. This was the estimated amount of breathable air Titan could carry if everything inside remained intact. It wasn't an exact countdown. Factors such as the number of people on board, their activities, and conditions inside the submersible could affect oxygen use. Even so, the figure gave rescuers a target. Every hour that passed increased the urgency. If Titan was still intact, there was only a limited window to find it. The search quickly became an international effort. The United States Coast Guard coordinated operations alongside the Canadian Coast Guard, the US Navy, and a number of commercial vessels already operating in the area. Aircraft searched the ocean surface, ships scanned the water below, specialist remotely operated vehicles known as ROVs, capable of diving to Titanic's depths, were transported to the scene. Even with all that technology, finding Titan would never be easy. The ocean is vast, the seabed is uneven, and at nearly 3,800 metres deep, there is no possibility of sending human divers down. Every search depended on advanced sonar systems, underwater cameras, and robotic technology. Then came a development that captured the world's attention. Search teams reported detecting underwater noises. News outlets described them as banging sounds. Almost immediately, hope surged. Could the people inside Titan be making noise to attract attention? Could rescuers be hearing the submersible? For a time, nobody knew. Search teams redirected equipment towards the area where the sound had been detected. Every possibility had to be investigated. But as more information emerged, officials cautioned against jumping to conclusions. The source of the noise could not be confirmed. The ocean is full of natural and human-made sounds, and identifying one specific source is extraordinarily difficult. In the end, investigators found no evidence linking those reported noises to Titan. It is easy to imagine that modern technology can locate almost anything. In reality, it is very different. GPS doesn't work underwater, radio communication is almost impossible, and visibility on the seabed can be extremely limited. Search crews were effectively trying to locate a small submersible in a near total darkness across an enormous area of sea floor. It was a task that tested even the most advanced equipment available. 4 days after Titan disappeared, a remotely operated vehicle searched near the wreckage of Titanic, and it made a discovery. Debris from the submersible had been found. The location of the debris field suggested a catastrophic event occurred close to the bow of the Titanic, and soon after, the United States Coast Guard announced that Titan had suffered what investigators describe as a catastrophic implosion. The rescue operation became a recovery mission. Next time we'll examine the evidence behind the announcement. How did investigators conclude that Titan had imploded? What exactly was found on the seabed, and why are large sections of the submersible still visible? What does a catastrophic implosion actually mean? Until then, the evidence is on the table. The questions remain. We'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. On the 22nd of June, 2023, 4 days after Titan disappeared, the search changed forever. An ROV searching the seabed discovered debris field near the wreckage of the Titanic. Soon after, the United States Coast Guard announced that Titan had suffered what is described as a catastrophic implosion. Within minutes, headlines around the world carried the same words: implosion. But what does that actually mean? How did investigators reach that conclusion? And if Titan imploded, why are there large pieces of submersible still found on the seabed? Today we're separating the science from speculation. I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. People often confuse explosion with implosion. An explosion pushes outwards. Pressure inside becomes greater than the pressure outside, forcing everything away from the centre. An implosion, is the opposite. Pressure outside becomes so overwhelming that the structure collapses inwards. At Titanic's depths, the pressure is around 380 times greater than the pressure at sea level. Every part of Titan was consistently resisting the force. If the pressure hull failed, the surrounding ocean would rush in almost instantly. Investigators did not use the word implosion lightly. Several pieces of evidence pointed to the same direction. Communication with Titan stopped suddenly. There was no gradual loss of contact, no emergency messages, no indication that the crew attempted to deal with a developing problem. The debris field was later discovered close to the wreckage of the Titanic. Its pattern was consistent with a sudden structural failure rather than a submersible that had landed intact on the seabed. Investigators also reviewed acoustic data collected from the time of the communication loss. Officials later confirmed that an acoustic event consistent with an implosion had been detected around the same time Titan disappeared. Taken together, these findings lead investigators to conclude that Titan had suffered a catastrophic failure of its pressure hull. One question appears again and again. If Titan imploded, why weren't all the pieces tiny? And it's a reasonable question, and the answer lies in how Titan was built. Not every part of the submersible experienced the same type of failure. The carbon fibre pressure hull was designed to withstand the crushing pressure of the deep ocean. Other components, including the titanium end cap and some external structures, were made from different materials and had different roles. When the pressure hull failed, not every component was destroyed in the exact same way. And that's why investigators were able to recover recognisable sections of the submersible from the seabed. Finding large pieces did not contradict the conclusion that the pressure hull catastrophically failed. This is perhaps the most difficult question. Based on the evidence available, investigators do not believe there was an opportunity for a survival after the pressure hull failure. The force involved in the depth are beyond anything the human body can withstand. Although investigators continue to examine exactly how the failure developed, there is no evidence that those on board experienced a prolonged emergency after the hull collapsed. While investigators agree that Titan suffered a catastrophic implosion, the biggest question remains: why? Was it the carbon fibre hull? Was it fatigue caused by repeat dives? Was it the flaw that had gone undetected? Or was it a combination of factors? Those are the questions official investigators have continued to examine. An implosion explains what happened. It does not, by itself, explain why it happened. Next time, we'll look at the official investigations, what evidence has been recovered, and what investigators say so far, and what lessons could change the future of deep-sea exploration. Until then, the evidence is on the table, the questions remain, and we'll let you decide. This is Say It Anyway. When major transport disasters happen, the investigation doesn't begin with blame. It begins with questions. What happened? Why did it happen? And could it happen again? And perhaps the most important question of all, can lives be saved by learning from it? Following the loss of Titan in June 2023, investigators from multiple organisations began one of the most complex marine investigations in recent history. This wasn't about proving a theory, it was about following the evidence piece by piece. I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. The first challenge facing investigators was simple in theory, but incredibly difficult in practice: recovering the evidence. Titan lay almost 3,800 metres beneath the Atlantic Ocean. At that depth, every operation required a specialist remote-operated vehicle capable of working in complete darkness under immense pressure. Over several missions, recovery teams located and brought sections of Titan back to the surface. Those included parts of titanium end caps, external equipment, and other components that could help investigators understand how the submersible had failed. Every recovered item became part of a much larger puzzle. The United States Coast Guard launched a Marine Board of Investigation. Its role wasn't simply to determine what happened to Titan. Its purpose was to examine every aspect of the incident: the design, the engineering, the operation of the vessel, the maintenance records, company decisions, industry practice, and the events leading up to the final dive. Investigators also worked alongside experts from other organisations and countries, drawing on specialists in engineering, material science, and deep-sea operations. Investigations like this don't begin with conclusions, they begin with facts. Investigators studied recovered debris, examined electronic records, reviewed communications, witness interviews, analysed photographs and videos, compared engineering calculations with real-world evidence. Each answer often created another question. Could the carbon fibre hull have weakened over time? Did repeat pressure cycles contribute to the failure? Were there warning signs that weren't fully understood? Every possibility must be tested against the available evidence. Even before the final report is complete, Titan disaster has already promoted wider discussion throughout the marine industry. Many organisations have revisited the importance of independent certifications. Others have questioned how experimental technology should be introduced when passengers are involved. The tragedy has also highlighted the challenges of balancing innovation with safety. Progress often depends on new ideas, but those ideas must also withstand rigorous testing with human lives that are at stake. Although investigators have confirmed that Titan suffered a catastrophic implosion, not every question has been answered. Exactly where did the failure begin? How did it develop? Could it have been detected earlier? Would different testing procedures have identified a problem? Could changing the design have prevented the disaster? These are questions that require careful scientific investigation and not assumptions. That process takes time, sometimes even years. Next time, we reach the final chapter. Looking back at everything we've uncovered. The warnings, the engineering decisions, the testing, the final dive, the investigation. Could the loss of Titan have been prevented, or was this a tragedy that only become obvious in hindsight? We'll weigh the evidence one final time. Until then, the evidence is on the table. The questions remain. We'll let you decide. Every investigation eventually reaches the same point. The evidence has been gathered, the witnesses have spoken, the engineers have examined, and now comes the hardest question of all. Could this have been prevented? It's a question that has been asked by families of those on board, by engineers, regulators, and journalists, and by millions of people who followed the story from around the world. But answering that question isn't as simple as a yes or no answer. Today we're looking back at everything we've uncovered throughout this series to see what the evidence tells us, and just as importantly as what it doesn't. I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway. From the very beginning, Stockton Rush believed that deep-sea exploration needed to change. He believed certification slowed innovation. He believed carbon fibre represented the future, and he believed OceanGate could make visiting Titanic more accessible than ever before. History is full of people who challenged accepted thinking and transformed entire industries. Without innovation, there would be no progress, but innovation carries responsibility, especially when human lives are involved. The challenge is knowing where the bold thinking ends and the unnecessary risks begin. Throughout this investigation, we've heard about concerns raised before the final dive, former employees questioning aspects of Titan's design, experienced engineers expressing concern about the use of carbon fibre in a repeatedly pressurised hull, and the Marine Technology Society urging OceanGate to consider independent classification. These warnings were real, but the warning is not proof that a disaster is inevitable. Engineering disagreements happen every day. Most never lead to tragedy. The difficult question is whether those warnings viewed together should have led to a different decision. Some facts are no longer in dispute. Titan suffered a catastrophic implosion. The pressure hull failed. The loss happened rapidly. The evidence recovered from the seabed supports that conclusion. What remains less certain is exactly why failure occurred. Investigators continue to analyse the materials recovered, engineering data and operational history to understand the sequence of events that led to the implosion. The work is essential because it understands the cause is the only way to reduce the chance of something similar happening again. The Titan disaster has already changed conversations about deep-sea exploration. Companies developing experimental technology are likely to face greater scrutiny. Independent certification has received renewed attention. Engineers continue to debate the role of new materials, including carbon fibre, in extreme environments. Innovation will continue. Exploration will continue. But the standards expected by regulators, investors, and the public may never quite be the same again. Sometimes progress is measured not only by new discoveries, but by the lessons learned from painful failures. So, could Titan have been prevented? The honest answer is, we do not know yet every detail. Official investigations continue and some questions remain unanswered. What we can say is this: the disaster did not occur in isolation. It followed years of engineering decisions, testing, debate and documented concerns. Whether different choices at this stage would have changed the outcome is something investigators continue to examine. It's important not to replace the evidence with certainty, where certainty does not yet exist. The story of Titan is ultimately one of ambition, innovation, risk and tragedy. It reminds us that pushing boundaries has always carried consequences. The challenge is ensuring those consequences are understood before lives are placed in danger. So thank you for joining me throughout this investigation. Over the past 13 files, we've explored people, the engineering, the warnings, the final dive and the evidence that followed. If this series has shown anything, it's that the truth is rarely as simple as the headlines. Real investigations take place and take time. They demand evidence. They require us to question assumptions, challenge rumours and follow facts wherever they lead. Because that's what we try to do. The evidence is on the table. The questions remain. We'll let you decide. Thank you again. I'm Lisa, and this is Say It Anyway.